All right, so yeah, I need to talk here a bit about magic and some issues regarding defining magic. What we'll see there's there's a lot of challenges regarding its definition. First off, there's very little solid consensus over a definition. How it's been understood and defined over time has varied quite a bit. All right, throughout history, it's differed in interpretation and meaning, as well as within academia. And I'm just going to highlight here a few trajectories at play here in understanding what actually constitutes magic. These all will highlight how historical context is really the main thing that determines how it's going to be defined. Right? It's largely contextual in terms of its definition, as we will see. So first off, what is actually a difference between magic and religion? Well, originally there wasn't one. Okay. Basically, what magic is about, what it implies, is that a person has access to these hidden realities, these hidden powers, what we often call spiritual powers and realities. And the word occult, okay, which magic is always associated with, literally just means that which is hidden. Okay, that which is hidden, i.e., what I call the invisible world, that trans-empirical realm. Okay, so there really was no differentiation between magic and religion in pre-literary societies because both magic and religion is dealing with this hidden world of spiritual realities and spiritual forces, powers, beings in various ways. Okay, so there really was no difference. You don't find any kind of such use of language in pre-literary societies and even in ancient civilizations. It was all just regarded as spiritual. Okay, so there was no division. And what we find in the very beginning is that people who were gifted with this special ability to communicate and connect with these spiritual realities, and then be able to bring the power and wisdom of these higher spiritual realities to humanity to help the community in one way or another, largely by bringing healing, protection from harm and evil, right? Ensuring prosperity, success, good luck, and guidance, okay, to be able to see into the future, to know which way to go, if it to go this way or that way, right? We all need that guidance. This is what people always sought, was that wisdom, right? Information, all right, supernatural information and supernatural power, okay? That which is a knowledge beyond us and a power that's beyond us for various purposes. And so the shaman is the forerunner of all of these, of all future religious specialists. Okay, the shaman is sort of the very first religious person, so to speak, as an expert, a religious expert, having the special gift and ability. And from there, religious leaders take on various names and forms. So there's an evolution of spiritual leadership here. We see from history that religion begins basically with shamanism. That is the most ancient form of what we could call religion. And the key leaders here were those people who had the gift for communicating with these transcendental realities. They were able to journey to those other realms to access information and empowerment in order to serve the community. And so then, once civilizations start developing, we're starting to leave a pre-literary society of hunters and gatherers to the development of agriculture, and then people start settling in areas where they grow regular crops, and then from that we get the beginnings of civilization. Right? We see this in ancient Egypt, the Samaria, over in India, over in China. This is how the earliest civilizations form, is with the development of agriculture. People stay put in one area for the crops, right? And the population grows. And then they start developing all kinds of, they start developing writing, keeping of records of things. And then we have the religious leaders, spiritually gifted ones. They are serving the rulers, serving the kings, ensuring their success and future empowerment, bringing guidance on things, healing as necessary, etc. Okay, that's sort of how it begins. So from there, then eventually we get religions being born, and we have this whole institutionalization process of religion, and with that, new lines of leadership develop. Those who will be appointed and trained as experts, maybe in the conducting of rituals, working at the temple, serving the king. They'll then become the priests, right? as a little bit distinct from those who are especially gifted in having contact with the spirits and gods, being able to see into the future in some way, right? The gifted ones. So in this context here, in the context of pre-literary societies, the figure is a shaman. Then when writing and civilization develops, and then eventually different religions, then we get those who were formerly known as shamans, they then may be regarded as prophets, being able to hear the word of God, having that special connection with the spirits and gods. Or there may be the enlightened ones who then develop superpowers, have super knowledge, the gurus that we see in India, for example. Or, as we'll see in the Greco-Roman world, they often are regarded as magicians. And the thing is that these spiritual leaders who have direct connection, they often can be at times challenging the establishment. Okay. Yes. So that is one area in terms of magic, in terms of leaders, people who have the gift to connect with these spiritual realms, right? Well, then magic also is a particular type of ritual. And here we see a bit of a difference between, or differentiation being made between religious rituals versus magical rituals. And what is that difference? Religious rituals, basically they involve the worshiping of the gods, prayer, asking the gods for a favor, for something or other, right? So it's making requests of the gods. And generally they are more passive in nature, where people are simply seeking connection with the divine, worshiping the divine, and making requests of the divine. But ultimately, they depend upon the divine to make any changes in reality. This is key. The power for change always lies with the gods. If they hear your prayers, right, then there'll be a change. But basically, you as an individual, you are passive. You are making the request, that the power lies with the gods. And so that is what's always sort of distinct to a religious ritual, how many would define it. Okay, this is rather common orientation. A magical ritual, on the other hand, is more proactive. It's the practitioner, the person doing that ritual, is purposely seeking to change reality, to cause an effect through that ritual. So they may call upon a spirit or a god to help in this, okay? But the main, to assist in this whole thing. But the person who's doing the ritual, they are the main actor here, evoking the change, right? They're making it happen through this ritual. So in this sense, it's seen as being somewhat manipulative, and in that it's the person doing the ritual that is doing the work of shifting and influencing and working with these forces for a purpose of some kind, okay? And that's basically the difference. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Okay. Well, then another factor comes into play here in terms of this whole what is magic versus religion, is the whole arena of good versus evil polarities. Okay. Now, all societies have a sense of good versus evil forces, good and evil realities of some kind, that there are these forces and beings that exist out there, but there also is a sense that there's an order to the universe of what's right and what's wrong, okay? A moral order of right and wrong, of good and evil. And with that is tied in a sense of, well, this is holy, this is pure, this is good, and this over here is unholy, impure, not good, okay? So basically constructive versus destructive, holy, unholy, right, wrong, good, evil, this whole polarity, okay? So with this is the idea that religion then can be used in a right way versus a wrong way, okay? So that you could use rituals for in the proper way or in an improper way. Right? There's a right way of doing it, a wrong way of doing it, or there's certain aspects associated with it regarded as holy versus unholy, and that potentially it may be dangerous versus safe, constructive versus evil. Okay, you get that kind of thing happening. So just for example, in the tantric tradition, you'll have what's called left-handed tantra versus right-handed tantra. Right-handed tantra is what's acceptable. Okay, it is seen as good, it's acceptable, it's within orthodoxy. But left-handed tantra has been on the edge and is shunned as something. It has a lot of taboos associated with it, in terms of there being actual sex with people outside of marriage. There could be the ingestion of substances, certain kinds of foods, certain kinds of plants to evoke visionary states, alcohol, and various aspects of ritual involved that are seen as taboo, as unholy, impure, not good, okay, potentially dangerous, right? And so you get that kind of division just within Tantra. And then, of course, then, more extreme, you'll have like what developed in the West, blatantly called satanic rites of literally worshiping an evil being, right? And involving sacrifices of even humans and animals and various things in order to gain the power through that in one way or another, right? And then, of course, you always have like using spiritual power to curse somebody, or also using it to bless somebody. Okay, blessings versus curses. Okay, so obviously you can use spiritual power to harm others, to inflict pain, evil, literally even maybe sacrifice them in order to get that power from that person in some way, or they're deemed as somehow unholy and impure, right? They're just basically not good and are forbidden to do. All right, so then you get then that which conforms with the orthodoxy, or orthodoxy, that terms of mainstream acceptable religious beliefs, and orthopraxy is mainstream acceptable religious practices, okay? And then those that diverge from established religion are labeled then as deceptive and dangerous heretics that often are, seen as leading the righteous away from that which is true and holy. So you get this kind of division happening, that there's good religion, bad religion, good powers, bad powers, right? And this type of polarity. And the unholy is always seen as a threat to that which is holy. Okay, it is seen as harmful and destructive. And this is what then ends up happening to a lot of what gets labeled as magic. Magic starts to be seen as being something that is unholy. It is not acceptable by the mainstream religion, or the mainstream, what's acceptable in mainstream society in some ways. Okay. And as we'll see, this is something that really develops in the Greco-Roman world. Okay, and I'll get into that more in a bit here. But it's based on the idea that not all spiritual powers are equal. There are some that are holy, of God, and others that are evil and not of God. And so they are forbidden and condemned. And you'll see this, it's evident in all religious traditions, okay? That's seen pretty much everywhere. But specifically in the West, how it develops here in the biblical tradition is that the Jews were called to be exclusively committed to Yahweh, the God of Israel, and all practices of the surrounding people, the pagans, okay, they're generally held to be those outside of the Jewish tradition in a sense here, was become largely condemned in the biblical tradition. These practices of the other people, right, were labeled as sorcery and witchcraft, that these other people are calling upon other gods for that power, and that these gods either are false in the sense that they actually have no power, or they're seen as evil, okay, or they eventually get seen as they don't even really exist, and therefore they don't even have any power, so why waste your time with them? Okay, this is what's all going to lead to the monotheism that develops in the Jewish faith. So the Israelites, however, they did use practices that basically were very similar to other people, okay, that we would call magical practices. But it was okay, it was acceptable, because they were done in the name of the God of Israel, of Yahweh. All right. They were seeking their God alone, and they were not worshiping other gods or calling upon other gods for that power, but they were just looking exclusively to their own God. So just as an example, they used all kinds of omens, were regularly used, various little rituals that they did, the casting of lots to help in making a decision to do this or that. The use of these stones, the Urim Thummim that you see there, these were apparently stones put on the breastplate of the priests that it's not clear to us, but we think that they could kind of give like yes, no answers to things, and almost similar to like almost like tossing them in some way to get an answer, and that God would direct the answer that would come through them. Haruspicy, which I had mentioned before earlier, is again was a very common practice in the ancient Near Eastern world of sacrificing an animal like a sheep to then look at its entrails, you know, to its innards, to get the answer to the question in the shape and form and patterns in its entrails. Okay, that was done within ancient Israel as a way that the God of Israel would speak to them and give them guidance on things. Okay, and of course they had their prophets bringing them the messages from God. So you had these sorts of things here in ancient Israel, and here you clearly have that what we do is good because it's connected to our God, and what other people do with their gods, that is evil. Okay, you get that kind of division. So here is where we then see this continuing on in the Greco-Roman world, and even this is where the word magic really gets established. It's a trend that began in the Greco-Roman world, and I think it's in the next slide where I have the words for you. But you got to remember that the Persian Empire, okay, that was established around what 530 BC. Okay, onward for a couple hundred years, a huge Persian Empire was established from roughly 500 to 300 BC, okay, for a couple hundred years. And they had their religion of Zoroastrianism that was dominant. And then the Greeks, Alexander the Great, overthrew the Persian Empire and established, you know, the Hellenistic or Greek Empire, so to speak. And then after that, the Romans established the Roman Empire, right? And so they then overtook the Persian Empire, of which Zoroastrianism was the state religion, the official religion of the Persian Empire. And so this is where we start to see clearly this new trend emerging of the demonization of magic. Because the word magic itself comes from the Greek, as you can see here, the Greek word and the Latin word. But originally the word referred to, all right, the arts of the Magi, you know, the Zoroastrian priests from Persia. And it is their religious rituals, basically, their ways of tuning into the future, gaining spiritual power over things, the kinds of rituals that they would do, basically their religion, so to speak. Okay, these were sort of the priests of the Zoroastrian religion. They were the Magi. And then just to go back, let's go back here. See here, we have here, you know, the Christmas story of the Star of Bethlehem that was seen by the three Magi, right, going to Bethlehem because according to astrology, there was going to be the birth of this future king of cosmic significance was to be born here in Bethlehem, so that the three Magi from the east followed the star to then come and pay tribute and worship the infant baby Jesus. Right? That's the whole Christmas story here. And you can see here at play, the Magi, these are Zoroastrian priests, and being guided by astrology of a significant, extremely important event, the birth of this child that would have global impact, okay, which is indeed what happens. And so this is the origins of the word magic. It beginning with the Greeks, they started to use this word as a pejorative term for the spiritual religious practices of foreigners, of that which was outside of official Greco-Roman traditions. And so it was denigrated, right? It's the bad stuff that those people do, okay? And so here's what, you know, you do find here in this time period, all these legends and stories that Zoroaster, the founder of the Zoroastrian religion, he's the founder of magic along with the Egyptians, you know, and it's all kind of interconnected. That becomes a part of a lot of the mystery teachings that has a long history in the West. But these were the religion of, this was the religion of foreigners. So here you get the beginning of this rather artificial construct of what we do. Our traditions here is what we call religion, and it's good. And what other people do, we're going to call it magic, and it's bad. And that's what they do. Okay. And so this is where you get the beginnings of the demonization of magic. And so let me just, I was, hang on here. No, is this where I was? Hang on here. I just want to, no, okay, let's backtrack here. Oops. And I thought I had a slide here about, anyways, just to highlight, maybe I need to backtrack here. But I know I had something, this is what I hate when I go and present and I can't see all my slides here. But I'm sure I got it on a slide coming up that, anyways, I just want to highlight here that, thousands, yeah, I know it's on a slide coming up here. Thousands of people were put to death by the Romans. Let me just see here. Did I miss a slide? No, I'm going forward. I want to go back. Okay. Is it up ahead? Oh, here it is. Here it is. Okay, the dangers. I should probably move this up here. But from the 5th century BC onward, Romans literally would put to death people that they found guilty of witchcraft and sorcery, i.e. they were using spiritual forces and doing these rituals that they started to call as magical rituals that were outside of what was accepted, and for various reasons, right? People put to death. They also burned thousands of magical books. Okay, texts were burned. Divination was at times banned, totally forbidden and banned. Astrologers were expelled. Okay, depending on the ruler and different time periods. Okay, I'm making a sweeping generalization, but from the 5th century BC onward, we see this sort of trend developing, where that this stuff is dangerous, it's dark, it's evil, and it is the enemy of Rome. Okay, it is the enemy of Rome. Even going back to Plato, very negative about magic and the use of magic. There's a story as well of witches who murdered a young boy in order to make a love potion. Okay, and that this is to be condemned, and that they mutilate corpses. They murder people to get their spirits to use the soul for magical purposes. All right, these very dark things start to be taught regarding magic in the Greco-Roman world. I just want to highlight that, okay? Because this is what gets incorporated later on in Christianity with a lot of the concepts that get developed in the condemning of witchcraft later in terms of the witch trials, okay? That a lot of these beliefs and ideas and concepts actually were inherited from the Greco-Roman world. And most people don't realize it. They think it all just began with the rise of Christianity. No. They inherited this type of orientation and perspective, okay? And since I'm on this slide, I just want to highlight this here point, that actually in the beginning of Christianity, early Christianity, they condemned witchcraft, okay, was condemned as being rooted in superstition. That people shouldn't believe all this garbage. They shouldn't believe all these stories, that there's nothing to them, that this was superstitious belief. And the earlier texts were condemning it as a form of superstition. Okay, that was the norm until around the 1450s, when that starts to change, where more and more problems were happening. Like you had the bubonic plague happening. People in the millions were dying. Almost like half of Europe died during the bubonic plague, the Black Death. Okay, and so people started to really believe there's something to this stuff, and they started to blame it on the dark magic of witches, that they are a danger. Okay, so it starts to shift here now, that wow, there really are these evil forces out there, these evil witches and Satan worshipers, and then the Jews got linked in there too, because they are of the Antichrist, because they had killed Christ, right? They're Christ killers, so they're Antichrist, and therefore they're of the devil. And you get all those ideas kind of being brought in here. That leads to the beginnings of the Inquisition and the witch trials that went on for about 300 years here. And generally, scholars estimate that the deaths were around 40 to 50,000, not the millions that often is touted around later on. Okay, that's just taken out of the air, pulled out of the air. Yeah, see, there's always so many things interconnected. You'll find that written in some books. I think it's even 9 million. How many million is it? Yeah, When I talk about Wicca, I might mention this, but I'll just bring this in now. When I talk about contemporary witchcraft and the revival of it in the name of Wicca with Gerald Gardner, okay, he had created a museum in England, in London there, that, I think it's London, where he put in a plaque. This is in honor of, I think it's 9 million witches that were put to death during the witch trials. He just came up with that number out of nowhere. And since then, it gets published in books and has been promoted as though it's historical fact. But historically, that's not the case at all, okay? But that's where this whole idea that there are millions put to death during these witch trials, it is just not based on history, all right? Okay, so let me go back here. Now, where was I? Am I going back? Yes. Okay, so this is again what happens here. The demonization of magic happens here in this time period. And with that also the demonization of the so-called witch, or not, I shouldn't say demonization, but the whole image of what a witch is, okay, and what that term refers to. Right? That begins here in the Greco-Roman world. That is largely associated with women, with the feminine, and therefore with the moon, because the moon is usually associated with the feminine deities and goddesses and forces, and with it the underworld, because Persephone is the queen of the underworld, the shadowy underworld where the dead go, the land of the dead, okay, and that's associated with night and darkness, okay? And so that witches then are in alignment with these type of deities that are associated more with death and the underworld. And so they do their work at night, it's usually working with the cycles of the moon, and they do evil, right? They will kill, harm, drive you insane. If it be people, animals, crops, they're destructive, right? They can fly through the sky and teletransport. They can shape shift and turn into an animal. Okay, and this is again where you see, kind of ancient shamanic kind of ideas here. They're skilled at making poisons and potions, right? Not just good herbs for healing, but again, sort of like how shamanism gets demonized, right? Who is a medicine man healer, how this kind of gets demonized, right? So they could see into the future, see across space and time and distance, could call upon the spirits of the dead, right? And do all these terrible things. And there are deities that were associated who were either virgins or hags, but not mothers with children. Okay, they had no children. And so then with this, you'll have references, and I think I just mentioned one, right, of the killing of children, the killing of the babies, and using that for various purposes. And that will be carried on throughout the medieval world and gets associated with Satanism, satanic ritual, the sacrifice of babies and stuff. Will all have its roots in some of this, okay? Okay. So then in the Greco-Roman world, though, we'll see the rise of certain individuals here and there who then become referred to as magicians. In another context, they probably would have been referred to as shamans, medicine men, healers, right? But in the Greco-Roman world, they're labeled as magicians. Right? In the Jewish world, okay, they would be labeled as prophets, for example, like Jesus, right? But in the Greco-Roman world, this is the label that starts to develop here. So these are people who have access to these superpowers, right? These magical powers. They have a deeper knowledge and understanding of reality, these hidden forces, how they work and how to access them and how to work them, okay? Various things that were associated with a shaman now gets to be associated with a magician. However, they are now held in suspicion. Okay, they tend to be persecuted and ostracized from mainstream society and religion, despite popularity. Okay, they may be very popular among the people because of what they can all do, but they're not going to be popular with the political or religious establishment. They're going to be seen as a threat. Okay, and this is probably what happened to Pythagoras. I think, if you watched one of those videos there of how his school, with many called a cult, got totally destroyed. All right, they were all killed and destroyed, and possibly because they were seen as being a threat. So just to give you a little, few examples, a very well known in various sources here was Apollonius of Tyana around 15 to 100 CE. So in the first century of the Common Era. He was a student of Pythagoras, right? And, was a vegetarian, made a vow of silence for 5 years. That was what was involved to be a student of Pythagoras, is that you would be committed to not speaking for, 5 years, and very disciplined life. And through this, and he acquired these abilities, right, to create miracles, could do all kinds of things, heal people, teletransport, that is to be, from place A, and all of a sudden disappear and be in place B, right, just instantly be in another place, okay, and is referred to in texts that we have as a rival of Christ, as a competitor to Christ, of having these superpowers, right? Yeah. And then Simon Magus, he's also a magician. Again, he's got the word of being one of the magi, like having these kind of powers. He converts to Christianity, so we've got reference to him in the New Testament, and I think also outside sources, if I remember correctly. And he converts to Christianity. He's so impressed with the powers of the early Christians, the miracles that they could do, the healings that they could do, and the power of the Holy Spirit of God. And so he asks, please, yeah, I've been able to do some of this stuff, but not like you guys. And he asks to buy the power of the Holy Spirit. And he gets condemned for that. It's like, you cannot buy the power of God. So you got a whole story about him. And did I already go through this? Didn't I? Yeah, I think I read this, right? Yeah. And so Jesus at that time period, by outsiders, not within the Jewish camp, but by outsiders, was regarded and labeled as a magician. But of course, in Christianity, he's seen as more than that, because he had the powers and ability to heal people, do amazing things. But he did it differently. He did it largely simply through speaking the words of command: rise up and be healed, rise up and walk, and would do things without a lot of ritual stuff going on in terms of, various elements and elaborate rituals and elaborate invocations. It was pretty straightforward and clean, of just speaking forth words of command. And then that ability went on to his followers, right? Just say in terms of, Peter, for example, St. Peter here is, I think, was it in front of St. Peter? I can't remember now, with Simon, where he got condemned because he says, no, you can't buy the power of the Holy Spirit. But, they healed people and miracles happened amongst the early Christians, right? And so he was trying to have a similar type of power. So, it got passed on from Jesus to his early followers. As he said, what I do, you also can do. And you have the spiritual authority to do so. And that's why that phrase I had mentioned in a previous lecture, that to you, I give to you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you let loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. That becomes the basis of the papal authority, the power and authority of the Pope. Oh, I go into too much detail. But that it was given from Jesus to Peter and then to the Pope, who is the head of the church at Rome, because Peter ended up in Rome. And therefore, there was a lineage of transmission of spiritual authority and power. That's sort of the idea that has justified papal authority in the Catholic Church. But the way others see it outside of Catholicism is that authority, spiritual authority, that us here on earth, whatever we declare and bind and let loose, so it shall happen spiritually. That we have spiritual authority. It is given to us here on earth. So the power lies not just in the heavens, that whatever is done by beings in the heavens, that they have the power over earth, but we now here on earth have the power over spiritual realms. Okay, that's sort of the idea of that passage. Okay, and so again, in a broader sense, with the meaning of magic, it is about working these powers. All right, working these powers. Okay, so I think I kind of ended that part. So I'll end that for now and do a separate recording after this. Oops, I just want to stop.